If you are watching this video, chances are you play video games. I don't know what games you play, but I'd also bet you've played at least one cheap or free game in your lifetime. Free games are an awesome deal because the additional purchases are typically optional for progression in the game, and you can get a whole group of friends together to play without having to convince them to buy it. Monetization in the form of cosmetics and other not pay-to-win methods is a win-win for players and developers alike. It's easy to attract new players, retain old players, and keep the game fair and balanced. Another recently re-energized phenomenon is the cheap game. AAA studios are constantly jacking up prices, so it feels like a breath of fresh air when a game like Vampire Survivors comes along with an incredibly low asking price and hours of content. Even massively popular indie games like Stardew Valley or Terraria are a mere fraction of the price of FIFA or Call of Duty. Plus, indie games tend to go on much steeper discounts than AAA titles. And again, it's a relatively win-win scenario, because a game is easier to purchase if it is cheaper, and for a new indie developer, getting people to play your game with a big price tag is difficult. But how does calculating price actually work? For what reasons do some developers price their games less than $5 and some go up to $20 or even $30? First of all, and most obviously, is that games take money to make. Store assets, soundtracks, outsourcing development and art, and quitting your full-time job all amount to surprisingly large sums of money. It's not uncommon for an indie development team to spend more than $500,000 on their game's development, especially when they have the funding from a publisher and incentive to take their time to make the game as good as possible. Notably here, a lot of indie games do get publishers, however antithetical that may be to the indie title they are given. Another metric for a game's price is how long it takes to play. Unfortunately, players often subconsciously value quantity over quality and end up feeling ripped off if the game they paid more than $20 for has less than 10 hours of content, however meticulously crafted that content may be. Consider the price per hour metric. Let's say the vast majority of players will play a game to story completion rather than achievement completion. Well, I can say for certain that I played Celeste until story completion, which happened to be reaching the top of the mountain, and that took me about 8 hours. This comes out to about $3 an hour, which sounds pretty fair to me. I pay upwards of $20 for a movie ticket, and that ends up being more like $7 per hour. But then we can go to the other end of the spectrum and see another game I play, Bloons TD6, has about 160 hours played and a price per hour of 6 cents. Now, I'm not saying that Bloons TD6 should cost $400, but I am saying that it has every right to cost more than it does. Games are also priced on how many players the developer would like. For example, my game Bug TDX was priced super cheap because I'd rather have a lot of players over a lot of money. Money just wasn't as important to me as making sure everyone could play my game was. If the game has a publisher, the publisher will also take a cut, which may mean it'll take more time for the developers to recuperate their costs, and thus the game should be priced higher. Remember that the price of a game does not go directly into developers' pockets, in fact, far from it. These considerations end up taking different priorities depending on the developers and publishers. For example, Devolver Digital games are often priced higher than any other indie games because large publishers often take a greater cut for the reach and marketing they provide. On the other end of the spectrum, a game like Snake RX that took 3 months to develop as a single developer with the sole intention of making a profit can afford to price itself lower because it has a lower break-even point. However, the problem with pricing games this competitively is that it can diminish the perceived quality of the game. Vampire Survivors has reviews from people with over 100 hours, yet it's priced at a measly $5 USD. Regardless of how popular the game is, I personally don't think it's a good idea for developers to price their games that low, because the more likely story is that the game will make few sales and fewer profit. Games like Brotato and Vampire Survivors, I'd say, are priced unfairly low, where I personally believe that the developer deserves more money per sale, simply due to their quality and massive amounts of content. It also means that other games priced in a similar range are compared to these staples, and are critiqued when they don't offer massive amounts of gameplay, which is absolutely absurd. An important part in making a sale when working as a salesman is to suggest a price that sounds genuinely impactful, because it can then reflect on the quality of the product. If your game is on sale for $1, people who see it will presume it's worth $1, which, as we know, is becoming decreasingly valuable in a world where a cup of coffee can cost upwards of $5. Video game prices are not scaling accordingly, except for AAA releases who don't actually need or even warrant the extra price. It's a really difficult topic to discuss, because cheap games are seemingly beneficial to both players and developers, but that's because we as players only end up seeing the popular $5 games. Developers of genuinely good games are shooting themselves in the foot if they undercharge for their games. Although it is a gamble pricing a game highly, if it is a good game, people will certainly pay for it. It's not as if you're forcing people to play it too, and there's a refund feature on Steam for a reason. A really good recent example of a well-priced game is Paper Planet. Despite the industry norm being $3 to $5 for these kinds of bullet heaven games, it seems the publisher Two Left Thumbs saw the value of the game, and they deduced a price that sacrificed competitivity for fairness. You can even look at the reviews of the game. People are not unhappy with their purchase and praise the amount of content the game offers. 100 reviews mightn't seem like a lot, but at 20 reviews, BugTDX has about 850 sales, so we can estimate roughly 4,000 sales for Paper Planet, which is obviously far more valuable as a $15 game rather than a $5 game. Now, all this being said, I'm not suggesting that $5 is never a reasonable price. For a game like Geometry Dash, in its early years, I think the price tag reflected the game itself. It had some cool pre-made levels and a limited level editor. For $5, that's good value but not obscenely cheap. But as time passed, and the game has seen many free updates, I feel the game is now worth more than $5, and more in the $10 to $15 range, despite its origins of a modest smartphone game. But increasing the price of a game known for its cheapness will inevitably result in backlash, as players will see the game as a $5 game, even if it is revised to be more. Geometry Dash has likely garnered developer RobTop millions of dollars, and for this, increasing the price seems to be worth very little. However, due to the game's popularity, it will become a point of comparison for other $5 games. So, to summarize, yeah, cheap games are awesome, but they do come at a price. Massively popular games inevitably set the standard, and that's no different for the price. Unfortunately, cheap games will mean developers have to price their games even cheaper in some genres to stay competitive. Subscribe, like, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.